In 1981, a scientist, a biologist, in fact, named Dr. Rupert Sheldrake proposed a theory of morphic resonance. This is based on the idea that each species has a sort of collective consciousness and that its habits and behavior patterns actually form a morphogenic field, kind of like an aura, if you will, or an electromagnetic field. And this contains information that no matter where another member of that species is at in space and time, they would have access to download that information. And he also proposed that, let's say, rats in London who were learning how to solve a water maze, they would, when they were successful in solving the water maze, impart this information into the morphogenic field. And then rats all the way across the world in, let's say, New York or California, who were seeing the water maze task for the first time, should actually perform better than if they didn't have access to this information. How would you test that? Well, when you train rats on a maze, you time them. And so initially, the very first set of rats, and Dr. Sheldrake said that this actually happened in 1920, by the way, and this is from his website. When you first train rats, they have a score. And then over time, as they begin to become proficient at that task, their speed improves. They get faster. And so theoretically, if you had the London group of rats, let's say at first it took them 5 minutes to solve the maze, but then over repeated series of exposures, they got it down to 1 minute. The theory goes, if there is a collective consciousness that is based on behavior, because these rats don't share DNA, then rats in New York or California should be able to do better, significantly better, the first time that they try the maze. So they probably wouldn't get it perfect, but maybe it'll be 3 minutes or 2 minutes or even 4 minutes might be statistically significant than the first set. But it doesn't stop there. Over time, over many, many generations, you should see a collective improvement in the species as a whole. So let's say 20 generations later, you have a rat in Singapore that is learning that maze, the water maze task for the first time. Boom, 1 minute. 1 minute, 30 seconds. And indeed, apparently, this is what they show. Now, there is a lot of criticism to this theory. And those that are hardcore materialist reductionists, especially in the science field, apparently are, they call them not so nice names as a professional. They don't insult him or anything, but the quality of his work is heavily criticized, and this could not be true, and so I present that to you as a counterpoint to say that there is heavy controversy in this theory. And our goal in this moment is not to say whether it's true or false, but to say if it is true. If it is true, what does this mean for you as a reality shifter, as a quantum jumper? Because those of us who have access to the quote quantum field, where we can tap into other lifelines and download information, sometimes critical information, other people who are having spiritual awakenings, who have certain gifts like clairvoyance, will also tap in to this auric field of information and download something that helps them navigate in their everyday reality, regardless of whether a reality is shifter. So there are a group of humans in a variety of different sectors, SEO groups, keywords, that have actionable pieces of information, data, and ability that they tap into beyond just the physical world in very strange and mysterious ways. So if the morphogenic field was true, then we would expect abilities to emerge. We would expect information to be downloaded and pulled down from the cloud, whatever the cloud is, whatever that thing is. And then we would expect that it would be beneficial and that it would help us in some significant way. And indeed, as you probably have already experienced, and many of my listeners have, this is exactly what happens to us. So now that we understand that there is a scientific theory that is hotly debated, but so is reality shifting and quantum jumping. If you talk to a normal scientist, I used to be one of those. I'm not anymore, thank God. No offense, but it's just a different way of looking at the world. And so now that we know that there's actually a scientific theory behind it, how do we use it to our advantage to level up our reality shifting game faster? This is where we go into the butterfly effect. So many people know about the butterfly effect, but just in case you don't, the idea is that in nonlinear systems, chaotic nonlinear systems, and I don't know how applicable the chaotic part is because everything kind of seems pretty ordered to me with just a very small degree of chaos. But the idea goes that when you break out of the space-time linearity, then a very small effect, like the butterfly flapping its wings, can affect a large tornado or even a hurricane 2 weeks later. And so very small, minute changes can actually have massive impacts. And so when we consider downloading stuff from the field, imagining for a moment that there's a group of humans, just like you, just like me, that are on their journey, that may not have talked about all of their abilities. When I discovered reality shifting, I wasn't even using social media. I was completely isolated by choice. And so it was remarkable to me to shift into a world where people were using the same terms. And before I had that echo back to me, I found these abilities and occurrences coming online. And I felt as though I was tapping into other timelines with other actual sentient conscious beings that could communicate back to me. And I didn't know how. And I didn't know about the morphogenic field. I didn't know about the quantum field. I didn't know about a lot of things. But I knew it was real. You see, when you start to experience the undeniable over a period of repeated exposures, you turn the most devout atheist into a believer because you understand on multiple different levels and multiple different ways that there's something different about the nature of reality. And you try to come up with a way to talk about it, or you learn about it, and you figure out what the labels are, what the communication vectors are. And then you start to attach these concepts to it. And then you start to share collectively. But what happens if you're in a box? It still happens. What happens if you're in a place where you're denied social media? Do you need social media to become a reality shifter? No, it still happens. The smallest changes can propel us forward no matter what the world looks like. The key is to find your group, to understand what your alignment is, to understand what labels and communication protocols actually work for you. And it doesn't matter what is going on. Things might get a little rocky in certain sectors of the time-space continuum. Just heads up, if you can't already see it, most people can, right? And this is a known factor. It is a known and has been known for a very long time. But it's going to be a little scary for some people. And as a reality shifting, you have tools in your toolbox that a lot of people don't have. And your goal, I would say, to remember is that you don't need what you think you might. All you need is yourself and your consciousness to shift. You can do it alone. You can do it without devices. Actually, it helps you sometimes. You can do it without TV. You can do it without electricity. I'm not saying that we're going to go there, but in a worst case scenario, you can do it. And sometimes the fastest way out is through. And understanding this principle of the morphogenic field, you don't even need to talk to other reality shifters. We could all be separated across the space-time continuum, or even beyond. We could be at the point of the supernovas and at the end of the world, and there are a couple of quantum travelers like myself who have been there, or in the void, and you're the only person existing, the only conscious entity for a moment. And it's quite frightening, actually, to be completely alone in existence, to be the only entity, but it's temporary. That's what I found. It's temporary. But you have to create. And so when you step into that creator's role and you set your intent to drive your will into creation, to harness the power of the sun, the energy of all the particulate matter around you, then it literally does not matter where you're at, what you have, and who's with you. Because the consciousness is within you. And the smallest little change, the smallest little creation can have a big, big impact. And understanding that we collectively are creating with each other all the time, just like rats. You know, how is it that in the 1920s, when they first started teaching rats to run through mazes, that 20 generations later, even when they took the quote, stupid rats, they learned faster. They learned faster 20 generations later than the very first rats in the 1920s. The best of the best in the 1920s were outpaced by the stupidest rats 20 generations later. Isn't that amazing? And this is why I believe that our systems that were designed in the mid to late 1800s are going through a big shakeup, because we have evolved collectively so much as a species. Our intelligence has actually increased so much. I did a study on this, just a short little project, a research project, not a scientific one. I Googled research and looked at some trends and did some analysis, casual analysis, and found that if you calibrate the IQ scores for the average person back in the early 1900s, there is a 30-point difference, meaning that that person in today's intelligence would be mentally handicapped. Functionally, today, they would be mentally retarded. Isn't that amazing? Functionally, they would be mentally retarded today. Sorry, I'm not supposed to say that term. Sorry. My apologies. So, that's what our society is going through. This big overhaul in infrastructure and design, who really the smartest humans at that time had created, today would be dead average in today's intelligence and far outclassed by any gifted person. So, this effect that we see in rats, we also see in humans. We've gotten smarter over time, more capable, more awake, and there is a maturation process. It's not just about intelligence, it's also about emotional control. It's about consciousness. It's about conscientiousness. It's about open-mindedness. It's so many factors, right? There's a difference in people who do the work versus people who don't. There's a difference in people who show up as a creator and those who show up in child consciousness. It's not about age, but in childlike consciousness. And there are people in their 80s and their 90s that are still in childlike consciousness. They're heavily victimized and want everything done for them. And they don't show up as a partner. And they don't always understand things like boundaries or waiting. And part of the evolution of the child inside is breaking away from the dogma that all you have to do is behave and check the boxes, and heaven's going to be created for you. We are now entering into a realm where we collectively are a group of creators and manifestors and collective managers, and we care about other people. we actually care about creating a great world, and not just because we want the house on the hill only. There's nothing wrong with wanting nice surroundings and a stable place to live, or even luxury. But we're moving into an era of conscious capitalism. And we're moving into an era of expansion of human abilities because we have earned it. And we know how to tap into the quantum or the morphogenic field. And so, understanding that whenever there's a storm, and if you're the butterfly, all you have to do is flap your wings in the best way that you know how. And it's going to be very specific to each individual. And understanding that ultimately we as a species are shifting into a higher timeline, but there may be some who don't join us. And that needs to be okay, because not everybody is going to make the cut. And that is reality. Because there are some that don't do the work and don't care about the collective and haven't learned and haven't grown and haven't evolved. And it's not about education. It's really not. It's about self-mastery and self-creation and transcendence and actually looking within and becoming a better human.